Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today, I decided we're going to take some time to reflect on Jupiter's entrance into Gemini again, in light of the fact that we've now had going on a month of Jupiter's transit into the sign of Gemini. We've also had a large movement of planets through the sign of Gemini, including a new moon, the Venus cazimi, Mercury cazimi. So it's definitely been there's been a lot of opportunity to reflect on a number of things, on the planet Mercury, on the double-bodied nature of the sign of Gemini, or the quality of the element of air. So as I was thinking about what I wanted to do this week, especially since there aren't any, I mean, this is a quieter week compared to what we've had in a while. So I thought, well, one thing that would be really nice to do would be to sit and reflect on some of the early notes I've taken on Jupiter's entrance into Gemini. So that's what we're going to do today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections if you have them. I'd love to hear from you guys and what you've noticed from Jupiter in Gemini over the course of the past weeks since it has entered. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. When you are over there, be sure to check out our courses. We have courses that have just started and courses that are starting yet this month, the Horary program on the 22nd. Under the courses page, you can find all that information. And then if you go over to the live events page, we just had our June webinar on the 12th house. You can pick up that talk, or you can check out the talk that is coming in July. So those are the big things on the list, my promotions today. So let me switch over. Sorry, I'm having troubles with my real-time clock here. All right, there we go. So let's put the real-time clock up, and now let's take a look at Jupiter in Gemini. So here we are on Monday, June 17th. Jupiter's about 5 degrees into Gemini now. And if we back this up, we'll see that Jupiter has been in the sign of Gemini since late May. And so we are coming in about May 25th into the 26th. So we're coming up on a whole month of Jupiter, the first month of Jupiter in Gemini. Now, Jupiter spends about a whole year in the sign of Gemini. So if we push this forward, we'll notice that by middle of June next year, Jupiter's just entering the sign of Cancer. So we have a full year of Jupiter in Gemini. And I just thought, what have I seen so far from students? What have I seen so far from clients? People communicating about their experiences in the various social media forums that we curate, and the YouTube comments, stuff like that. And what have I personally experienced or observed? Because that's always a good place to go when you're an astrologer, is look at your clients, look at your students, look at the feedback you're getting, and then think about what you've been experiencing. So I have 5 Jupiter in Gemini observations. I would say that, remember, Jupiter and Mercury are both philosophers. They both are teachers. They are both associated with education. And so there's so much learning that happens whenever Jupiter's going through a sign. It's really interesting when Jupiter's in Gemini, the sign of Mercury, the masculine sign of Mercury, because there's a specific kind of learning that's going on and an opportunity to reflect in a certain way. And of course, these observations are not the truth, but they are part of truth. And that kind of, it's like life is like a moving classroom, and every year we get a new Jupiter classroom. So Jupiter in Mercury's double-bodied, airy sign of Gemini has some specific teachings. And these are the things I've been observing so far. You could add more to this list. And I think that, one of the most profound things about Jupiter in Gemini is how much the planet encourages us to be open-minded about truth itself and the experience of truth. And that there are, one of the greatest challenges that Jupiter in Gemini provides us with is the challenge to hold different truths at the same time. Different truths aren't always contradictory truths, right? So anyway, so these are 5 things I've observed. No particular order. Number 1, ideas that we have about ourselves are not particularly strong foundations. What I mean by that is, one of the things that I've been observing about Jupiter in Gemini is that it provides us for an opportunity to examine and maybe deconstruct various ideas that we have in general, but often ideas that we have about ourselves, about who we are, about what constitutes our authentic nature or something like that. And Jupiter in Gemini comes along and has this way of making us look at opposites. So if we claim to be one particular way, or if we claim to be identified with one particular truth or care or concern or cause, whatever the case might be, Jupiter and Gemini will have a way of forcing us to consider the opposite, or forcing us to become temporarily identified with an opposite truth about who we are, about what matters, or about what we care about will shift, and we'll be forced to care about something that feels quite contrary to maybe what we've thought we cared about previously. And so, some people might think, well, this is Jupiter and Gemini trying to get us to open our mind and take up the right perspective because we've had the wrong one. And I don't think that's quite what's happening. I think in a bigger, maybe more alchemical sense, what happens is when you're forced over and over, and I notice this in my clients, in myself, when we are forced over and over again to consider different ideas about who we are, over time, the tendency to try to establish our identity and our some sense of stability, some sense of personal coherence, that the attempt to do so, uh, rooted in ideas, just it fails. It has to fail at some point. Like the more that we try to establish a core sense of identity or self-worth rooted in ideas about who we are. Oh, this idea gives me strength. This idea gives me relevance. This opinion or this take or this, concern or cause or whatever. And we see these things, they temporarily give us a sense of identity, and then they fall apart. And they fall apart because we consider new things or different things until we get to a point where all of a sudden we go, well, maybe I just shouldn't try to define or prop my sense of self up based on ideas about who I am. It's like Heraclitus said, the soul is explored forever to a depth beyond report. And at some point, I think we get exhausted by trying to legitimize our sense of who we are based on ideas about who we are. Ideas are like costumes, and we keep trying them on. And then at some point, Jupiter and Gemini comes along. A Jupiter and Gemini season is great because not only can it change your idea about who you are, and maybe it is time for a makeover or wardrobe costume change, but it can also just remind you that they are in fact costumes, and that there is something fundamental about who you are that never needs a costume to be what it is or to be legitimate or valid. You don't need an idea about who you are to just be who you are. It's not that profound. I don't really think it's that profound of an idea, but it can be when we're so caught up in the mix of ideas that we think grant us importance or legitimacy or popularity or whatever. We find that there's this unconscious dogma that we sometimes have that's like, I am only as legitimate as the ideas I have about myself are interesting or compelling. Like, I'm only legitimate to the extent that the ideas that I am identified with are legitimate or interesting or provocative or smart or whatever. So maybe ideas about ourselves aren't strong foundations. Maybe that's kind of a freedom that Jupiter and Gemini is giving us. And I've noticed this in the early weeks of Jupiter and Gemini. I've noticed this within myself and other people, just that little reminder. Number two, the physical can steer the mental. This is something that I'll just be honest. So Ashley and I went to Las Vegas for a long weekend to see Dead and Company, which is some of the remaining members of the Grateful Dead, and they were playing in this thing called the Sphere. That's this big, huge dome that projects incredible visuals throughout this entire sphere. So you're immersed in the music of the Grateful Dead, but you've got this incredible. It's really hard to describe. It's like being in a dome that's like completely 100% a psychedelic, otherworldly visual journey, while also being there for this band that's playing. And they have other bands too that play. Fish has played. I think U2 has played. So anyway, we were there for a long weekend, and anyway, so during one evening, I was like, trying to navigate my way through a slightly altered state, all things in moderation. This is the Grateful Dead. So I was like, and I was reminded of something, and it was really, really cool because the visuals on the sphere, which was very overwhelming, and I was like leaving my body. So this is where this comes from. Sort of leaving my body because it's like, I mean, it's just so immersive. And as I was sort of leaving my body, and the visuals, by the way, were all planetary. It was super cool. I was like, and I'm very comfortable just flying around. But I realized I was like, I don't really know if I want to leave my body, right? And then what I noticed is that um I started trying to solve the problem of feeling dissociated, right? I'm starting to feel dissociated, and I don't really like how this is feeling. If you guys have ever, had a I'm talking about a very mild psychedelic experience. I don't go all out anymore. But anyway, I was like, I don't really want to feel that out of my body right now. But this very immersive experience makes it really difficult to do that. Like I couldn't even believe some people at these shows are clearly loaded, like way beyond what I'm comfortable with. And I was just watching some of them, and there were people like just like passed out on the floor. So this thing was so immersive. And of course, the Grateful Dead people are all very caring. And I also thought it was really cool, by the way, at the basement of the sphere, they had a mental health room for people who were having difficult trips. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, I digress. And by the way, let me just tell you, I do not think that psychedelics are necessary for any kind of otherworldly, mystical, or spiritual experience. I'm not someone who tries to peddle them like, oh, you ought to go do these kinds of things. But anyway, let me get to my point because I'm being long-winded and I apologize. So anyway, I'm feeling like I'm dissociating and I don't want to do this right now. But then I started trying to navigate and deal with the situation through ideas, through thoughts about the thoughts about the thoughts. And it's like I'm trying to manage now what has turned into a small committee of philosophers who all have brilliant ideas about what's going on and how to address it and if it's good or bad or why it isn't. And all of a sudden, my long, extensive background in psychedelic work, mostly through ayahuasca, kicked in, and I just took a deep breath. Breathe, and I just gathered all the thoughts up with my breath, and then just went, and just let them go. And this is the same kind of work that we do in any overwhelming situation through meditation or yoga. It's not really that different, but what I was impressed by, because after I made that shift, and then I was like, okay, there I am. Oh, yes, it's that simple. I can use my breath and my body. I can tap into my physical body and just draw myself in. And that is going to be more effective than trying to get myself into the kind of state of consciousness I want to be in through a long, large debate between tons of voices and ideas in my head. Don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-thought or mind or intellect at all. But I was like, the right thing to do right now is to not try to navigate a situation through thoughts and ideas, but through breath and body. And one of the things that happens when Jupiter is in Gemini is that the volume gets turned up on thoughts and ideas, and we can feel like they are really important, that it's really important to sort them out and get to the bottom of them. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to do. We need to have a kind of a breakdown or a dissection of ideas or a deconstruction of beliefs or thought structures or paradigms. And Jupiter and Gemini is actually very good at that. But because Jupiter and Gemini can also amplify the mental airy qualities so much, it can actually trigger that reminder that the mind is like a reflective dish that the body can actually steer. You can actually steer the quality of what's reflected on the surface of the mind in terms of all of these thoughts and voices through your body, through checking in with your body, through doing grounding, through stretching, through breathing. And so if the thoughts are getting too much, if they're getting inflated, which is a very Jupiter and Gemini kind of thing, you can use your body and bring it back in. I just noticed this. And it's funny because as I had this very simple realization, really, well, slightly high, in an incredible dome Grateful Dead experience, I was like, okay, that was so simple, you know? And I'm looking up at the planets and I go, oh, that was so Jupiter and Gemini. And I was like, I got to make a note of that and tell this story because people will probably think it's kind of funny. So if you find yourself flying out of your body, breathe, use your body to bring the thoughts back in. If the thoughts are getting so much that you're getting overwhelmed by them. We don't owe anything to thoughts. It doesn't mean that thoughts are bad or negative and that the body is good and get rid of the mind. It's a distraction. Well, no, I mean, it just depends on the circumstance, right? But if it is getting distracting, if the mind is becoming overwhelming, the physical can actually help direct and quiet or even just turn the volume down a little bit. So, good thing to remember while Jupiter's in Gemini. Number 3 is the loudest and most certain ideas will be returned to silence. Okay, so these are all like observations that came through, a number of these anyway, are observations that came through while at the Grateful Dead show. And so, so, so there's a set break, and then the guys come back and they start playing again. And during the set break, there were some people near me who were having, profound philosophical discussions, and there were many beautiful and sort of convicted and like very inebriated, like psychedelically inspired thoughts that were being shared. And I found it really sweet, like genuinely, like these are people who are feeling artistically inspired. These are people who are feeling spiritually inspired by the music, but they're sharing their thoughts. And it's like, the truth fountain is flowing. You know what I mean? And I found that this group with these very loud, convicted ideas, man, just just like that. And don't get me wrong, like I could get on that train in 2 seconds from now. If the energy captured me, I'm not above it. But the thing that I thought was so beautiful was when we got into a portion of the show is always dedicated. If you guys know who Mickey Hart is, he's an incredible drummer. He's like a sort of visionary journey drummer. And a portion of the show is called Drums and then Space. And it's this kind of exploratory part of the show that happens usually after the set break. And then anyway, so this group of people, when the drums came in, there was this like little interlude and they were all getting really amped up again about their ideas. And then the drums came in and it was just like watching a cup of water be poured out. And they just got totally silenced. And then it was funny. I found it really, really sweet and funny that afterward they were all just looking at each other like, like mind's blown, and they had nothing left to say. And I didn't take that as like, oh yeah, you guys should shut up and just, like I wasn't in any kind of place of judgment about it. I was totally amused. And I kept thinking about Jupiter and Gemini, how what's so beautiful about Jupiter and Gemini, because it's so mercurial, and Mercury can switch back and forth between opposites. Your cup is empty, your cup is full, your cup is empty, back and forth, pouring, filling it up and pouring it out. And that can happen with ideas and truths and things that we get really convicted about. And I noticed, like, I don't know, if I had to put a decade on it, I guess I'd say my 20s, maybe my early 30s. There was a period of time where I feel like there was so much more discovery within the realm of ideas. And as you age, it's kind of like, and I think this happens for most people, I don't know, but you're kind of like, well, I've kind of heard it all. Maybe it's like, oh, I've never heard it in that way before. That's really interesting. But you get to a certain place where you've heard a lot of things before. And especially for me as an astrologer, talking to thousands and thousands of people, I've heard so many stories. And it was an earlier stage in my life, and I don't mean this to be condescending at all. It's just there was a stage in my life where I would really ride the wave of excitement about certain ideas. But then, like without fail, the enthusiasm behind the idea and the newness of the idea would wear off, and just the cup would just get emptied. And then I'd be in a receptive position, and then a new idea would come. And I think of that as one of the most thrilling parts of youth. It's kind of like going back to when I was a freshman in college and I was a philosophy major. Every idea that I heard in these philosophy courses was brand new to me. And I couldn't have been more thrilled, you know? And then after a while, it's like, okay, I know that idea. I'm really used to that idea. I've played around with it. So it's not as shiny and mind blowing. And then another idea comes in, you know? And this is also what I love about Jupiter and Gemini is that we ride these waves of passionate conviction about various ideas. And then somehow something turns and it just gets emptied. And I think it's really important, like Jupiter and Gemini, from a large kind of process oriented standpoint, is just reminding us be careful with self righteousness, with the kind of certainty that is born of like anger and oppression and violence mentally, because the most exciting ideas eventually, like a cup that's full, will get emptied. That doesn't make them bad. It doesn't make them immature. It doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't mean your excitement isn't valid. But you got to hold that. We all have to hold that bigger perspective. And I think as time goes on, there are certain periods in our life where we recognize, oh, I'm really enthusiastic about something. I'm going to let myself be enthusiastic, but like this will wear off. And that's a mark of our maturity, I think, philosophically, that we allow ourselves to get passionate, but we don't get so lost, so certain, so self-righteous that we, you know, our conviction becomes like bitter and angry. Because then we haven't quite learned the lesson that, you know, something will silence us, something will humble us, something will empty us, and we'll be back in a position of awe and receptivity, you know, and then something new will come. That's fundamentally a beautiful part of life. Not, it shouldn't be a maddening or frustrating part that ideas change, that what's exciting changes. So just a general reminder with Jupiter and Gemini that the loudest and most certain ideas will be returned to silence. And I think of my friends, this show, you know, who were just so passionately convicted about their thoughts and their feelings. And then the drums came in and they were just, they were just completely wiped out, you know? And then they were back in the state of receptivity and awe and not saying anything when they were just blown away and happy. And I feel like Jupiter and Gemini offers us that kind of reset. You know what? Actually, it's kind of heavy to try to hold the same ideas all the time. You know, it's not very thrilling if you only hold the same ideas all the time. Is there a law in the universe that says you can't change the ideas you're excited about? Why? You know? Number 4, it's easy to judge people by making them into ideas. So, I was listening to a girl. We were walking down the hallway toward the Sphere from the Connected Hotel. By the way, this was my first time in Vegas, and I will tell you, I am not cut out for it. I was just like, I'm a lightweight. I do not party anymore, but I had a lot of fun. But it was also like this city is very overwhelming. This is like Disney World for kids who like to like. It was funny. We were in the taxi and this guy said, "This is a city of donations." I was like, "Yeah, yeah, no doubt." You should have seen Ashley. She's a double Taurus, and I convinced her that we were going to take $100 to the slots, and that would be all we would spend. And like win, lose, whatever, 100, and that's it. When we were like $40 into slots and she watched it go up and down, like, oh, you win $5. Oh, you lost 7. Oh, you won 17. Oh, you know, just like back and forth. We spent maybe an hour. And like watching my double Taurus wife, who absolutely, she's never gambled. She is very averse to like wasting money. I felt so bad for her. She was so traumatized by the whole thing. I was like, okay, like once the $100 was done, I was like, okay, like we're done. No worries. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place here. But so anyway, we're walking from this hotel toward the Sphere, and which is connected by this walkway. And there was this girl walking ahead of us, and she was all decked out in her hippie gear and everything. And she was talking to her friend, and she said, "What I see here are not real deadheads, but a bunch of conformist wannabes." I was like, "Yep, that's me." But that is definitely me. I'm like, I wish I would have been into the Grateful Dead at an earlier point, and I could be as pure as you. You know, I wish that whatever you're in touch with about the Grateful Dead, I was so pure that I could be in touch with that too. But anyway, I'm teasing. But I was listening to her go, it was a diatribe for a while, and people around her could hear her, and I'm sure were, probably it's not the greatest thing to listen to. And my wife, who's been, my Ashley traveled around the country in a van following the Grateful Dead. Like, she's about as authentic as they come in terms of someone who has a real past with the band. She's been to, I don't know, probably 50, 60 shows, or she's been to a lot, not compared to some people, but anyway, so so afterward, Ashley just said, the thing is that Jerry Garcia wouldn't have loved that attitude, because he was someone who was very open. Like, wherever you come from, at whatever level of engagement you have, come dance, have fun, enjoy the music. And this person was so strictly identified with being a deadhead, and she was looking around at people and superficially evaluating them based on things like what they're wearing, or whatever she was perceiving in people, maybe some of which was true, but either way, it is easy to judge people by making them into ideas. And that was something that I watched. And then I thought it was very interesting because, well, one of the things that Jupiter can do is it can get kind of inflated and dogmatic. And then it can get dogmatic about things that are supposed to be very open-minded, like you're being a deadhead or something. Anyway, so the thought that I had was, how you meet a person? You meet a person by purposefully, deliberately, and repeatedly freeing them from the ideas that start coming into your head about who they are. That's how you meet a person. If you want to meet a person, when you're getting to know them and you start noticing ideas that start to try to enforce, that's who this person is, that my idea tells me who they are. And you have to look at that idea and go, thank you. Your opinion is valued and under consideration. However, I'm going to keep an open mind. And slowly what happens is you meet a soul, you meet a person. This is a Jupiter and Gemini truth, a teaching that's actually there. And it's there through the tendency that our mind has to judge things based on ideas that we have about them. Or the same thing that can happen with Jupiter and Gemini is that we constantly free ourselves from the grips of dogmatic ideas, especially the slippery ones that seem like they're representing things that are very virtuous or advanced or progressive. Number 5, mercurial wisdom is yes and, or no but, so that eternity cannot be forgotten. With Jupiter and Gemini, there's always a yes and, or there's always a no but, meaning that Gemini is a sign in general, as is Mercury, the planetary host, that likes us to include things. It says, yes, this thing, but and also this thing. Or it says, no, but there may be an exception. The reason that Mercury wants us to think this way is because Mercury is always trying to make us aware of the fact that there are, in the scope of eternity, anything that's possible is, in a sense, true. So I know that sounds so big and grandiose, but it's like just take the simple example of light and dark. Two radically difficult things to comprehend can be true at the exact same time. For example, there is, in one sense, and I think you guys will agree with this. If this ends up being controversial, then oh well. I'm just trying to come up with an example. On the one hand, what we are doing to planet Earth as a human species is unnatural and damaging and probably morally bad. On the other hand, and I think both of these things can be true, and I think that the real challenge is, how do you hold both of these things at the same time? How do they impact the way you live and act in a moral universe while also having this bigger perspective? Because the other truth is that there is nothing unnatural happening in the universe at any time, ever. Right? Which means that what we're doing is somehow an extension of what is natural. That's hard. I don't like that one myself, but I do believe that that is another truth. And that to me, that's a perspective that I will say quite honestly is a perspective that I've had that kind of huge macro galactic it's just like such a big truth. And it can easily, if you cling to that truth only, you can make you it can you can end up bypassing your actual lived experience of planet Earth, where your actual common sense says recycle or it says take care of the trees, you know? So you don't want to use that perspective to avoid or evade the gravity of the other truth, which is that what we're doing is unnatural and we need to take care of the earth. But most of my experiences of that huge perspective that it is also completely natural what's happening came through psychedelic experiences, came through mind expanding experiences, almost all of which I would describe as mercurial in the sense that the mind is liberated from the limitations of ideas themselves. Where any idea, as soon as you try to take it literally and you get fixed in it, the psychedelic experience, or even meditation or prayer or contemplation, those shifts in consciousness have a way of liberating the fixity of ideas by introducing opposite profound ideas or complementary, but paradoxically compatible ideas. Like this is unnatural and this is natural. Sorry, I know that's like it's big stuff. And I don't think most of us can live in this huge eternal perspective because we're earthly. We're in bodies, you know, we're on the earth. But it is important that we understand that Jupiter and Gemini is helping us develop a perspective that is always yes and no but, and that you can't forget the scope of eternity. Remember that Hermes, the original Greek name for what we now call Mercury, the Roman equivalent, was the founder of astrology, a science meant to help us see eternity in the midst of the fluctuating opposites here on Earth. So anyway, we'll leave it there. I hope that these nuggets are little insights are interesting and useful. Had a great time in Vegas. My lips are totally chapped from the dryness. It was like 112 degrees there. It was so hot. And the last day as we got on the airplane, I've been putting chapstick on over and over because my lips got all burnt up. But it was a great experience. And I think it's really good occasionally to step out of whatever the normal flow of your life is, to step out of it and immerse yourself in art. You know, art, culture, a different place in the world, even if it's just for a couple of days. So Ashley and I make it a point to do something like this, you know, once or twice a year, just try to take a couple of days. And I honestly, I feel like that shift in perspective of going to a different time and place, just like kind of immersing yourself in music or art or culture or theater or whatever it is, it's very cathartic. So anyway, just as on a side note, I highly recommend at any point, if you guys get a chance to see a concert in the Sphere, what an immersive, beautiful experience it was. And you don't need to take anything really. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you guys had a good one, and don't do drugs. Be safe.